All across the country, we watched in disbelief as hundreds of pro-Trump supporters stormed the nation's capital on this past Wednesday. And while calm has returned to the people's house, the investigation is just getting underway, and some of those who took part from Michigan could face felony charges. Joining us to talk more is the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District, Matthew Schneider. Great to have you on the show with us, U.S. Attorney. Thank you for taking time out. We know you're extremely busy.
Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to talk about it. It's very important and ongoing right now.
With that, how is the decision made as to when to bring felony charges in versus just state charges?
Well, first of all, let me start. No matter what the charges we can't get through these charges unless we have cooperation and help from the public. And that's the first thing, is we're asking anybody who has information about what happened in Washington, D.C. to call 1-800-CALL-FBI or go to tips.fbi.gov. And if you know of people who were in Michigan who traveled across state lines in order to engage in violence, we want information about that as well. So to your question about whether or not it's a federal state charge, in the District of Columbia, every crime is a federal crime because every crime is handled by the U.S. Attorney there. That's just their system of doing things. So even a simple assault on a person or loitering or trespassing, that'll be treated under the federal system, under their system, which falls under the U.S. Attorney's office.
But with that, one thing I was absolutely astounded with, not only watching the live images, but the fact that so many of these people that were obviously breaking the law, not just trespassing, but breaking the law, they were doing it while they were live streaming or posting selfies. That has to be a huge aid for law enforcement to try to track these people down. I'm like, what are you thinking?
Right. Yeah, that was very nice of them to take pictures of themselves committing crimes. So now the FBI has that information. I've seen a number of those photos. And it's almost like if this were a recording, they're pressing the play button and we get to all see what happened as it happened. It took place. So right now, the U.S. Capitol is full of cameras. There's cameras everywhere. What has to happen now is the local police and the FBI, in coordination with the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C., they review those tapes, review them, identify the folks, put out bulletins, and then interview people. And then eventually, within short order, I know charges are being brought today and some were yesterday, people will be brought to justice.
So with that, when you're in the state of Michigan, you're hundreds of miles away from what took place in DC. How do you start piecing those pieces of the puzzle together by the individuals that live here in the state of Michigan?
Right. Well, there is a big difference between people who went from Michigan to Washington, D.C. to exercise their First Amendment rights or to engage in the right to assemble, and the people who may have gone from here to commit acts of violence. That's what we are looking at with our partners in the FBI. Now, most of the acts of violence that we can see took place by people who were in D.C. We have to find out what the mentality was, what the motive was, where did they form the intent? Did they actually form that intent to do that in Michigan? Was that a conspiracy that spread to Michigan? That's all under investigation.
So how important is it for members of the FBI and your prosecuting team to have the cooperation for the public on investigations such as this?
Oh, very very important. The public's input is so helpful to us. And in fact, it is on any crime. You know, we can't solve a lot of the murders in the city without people coming forward. And we can't solve a lot of the drug trafficking without people helping us. I think this is a bit different because oftentimes people who are victims of crime are very reluctant to come forward. Here, Americans are disgusted by what they've seen. It's revolting. People are destroying the U.S. Capitol. So we're getting lots of tips in from people who are giving us information, and that's very helpful.
U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District, Matthew Schneider, with us here on the MegaCast. And we should note there were thousands of people that did travel to D.C. to do just what you said. They went there for a peaceful protest. In fact, we had one of those members on our show yesterday, and some of them were just as shocked by some of the events that unfolded at the nation's capital on Wednesday. But at the end of the day, the ones that committed the crimes are the ones that you are going to be focusing on.
That's true. And that's no different than what we did this summer. People in Detroit protested peacefully, and that's great. And some people went to Portland to protest peacefully. Other people went to Portland so they could torch a police car or set the federal courthouse on fire. Those are the people that are the bad apples. Not everyone, but the people who are committing the federal crimes. That's exactly who we're looking for.
So what is the difference in some of the punishment when it comes to being tried federally versus in the state courts?
Well, that's a very good question. And since all of this is essentially in the federal system in DC, I categorize this in kind of two different parts, right? So the first section of crimes, let's say, they're more mild, maybe trespassing, destruction of federal government property valued at less than $1,000. That's a misdemeanor, unlawful entry to the Capitol. Those are more mild charges. Now let's look at the more severe charges. Destruction of federal government property valued over $10,000 or over $1,000. That's a 10-year felony. You can go to prison for up to 10 years. So look at those people who broke that window to get into the Capitol building. This is a historic building. That's an old window. Does it cost more than $1,000 to repair that? We'll have to assess that and find out. That's what people in DC will be looking at. And then you have to look at the other crimes that are potentially involved. Civil disorders, inciting a riot. There have been reports that explosive devices were located in Washington, D.C. Once you start using a bomb or engaging in violence or seditious conspiracy, then you're talking about you could go to prison for up to 20 years.
Matt, just an overall question, your thoughts when you saw those images play out on the TV screen?
Personally, I was disgusted and horrified. And I said to our children, you've got to get in here and watch this because I want them to see how it is not supposed to be. I thought that was such a disgraceful act. And I also thought burning police cars in Portland was disgraceful. We watched that as well. There's just no excuse for this. And the reason why I wanted to bring our children in there is because, look, it's okay to disagree with people. It's okay to disagree in the classroom, in the workplace. We can all disagree about politics, and that's just fine. But those disagreements should never, ever amount to violence.
So I know that you have a lot on your plate today, so we'll go ahead and let you go. But quickly, before we let you go, anything that you want to share with the public before we say goodbye?
Well, it's as I indicated, we always need the public's help. And let me just add about these disagreements that we have. I've been hearing for years elected officials, civic leaders, even members of the religious community decrying hateful language and saying we shouldn't have hateful language and we shouldn't have hateful rhetoric. Well, we're hearing those same leaders using hateful rhetoric now. Everybody's got to stop, right? I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, what your political persuasion is. We have to teach the children in the state of Michigan that if you disagree with each other, that's fine. Just do it respectfully.
And we got to remember too, all of this is happening in the middle of a pandemic. Don't we have
Right.
other things to worry about right now?
Yeah. How about our health? How about our health and our safety and our wellness? And how about the small businesses that are struggling? How about the people who are running the businesses and the restaurants that are out of work? Let's worry about them. Let's all get some takeout tonight and think about that.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we know that you have a big job ahead of you, you and members of your team there at the prosecutor's office. But thank you for your time. And with that said, I mean, 2021 didn't get off to the start that we hoped for, but let's
Yes.
hope can we just kind of tack it on to the back end of 2020 and say we're
let's do
starting
that,
over?
Right? Let's revise the calendar because 2021 can't possibly get worse. Let's hope.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time. Again, anyone that maybe attended the rallies there or know anyone from the state of Michigan that participated in the destruction, not the protest. We believe in the protest, but the
Correct.
destruction. Please go ahead and call the FBI and share that information with them because we are better when we stand together. We're going to take a quick break.
Call FBI.
1-800-CALL-FBI. Thank you so much to the U.S. Attorney Matthew Schneider for being with us here on the Mega